Pursuant to Revised Code 2929.1, Paragraph A, a court that sentenced an offender for a felony shall be guided by the overriding purpose of felony sentencing. The overriding purposing of felony sentencing are to protect the public from future crimes by the offender and others, and to punish the offender using the minimum sanctions that the court determines accomplish those purposes without imposing an unnecessary burden on state or local government resources. To achieve those purposes, the sentencing court shall consider the need for incapacitating the offender, deterring the offender and others from future crime, rehabilitating the offender, and making restitution to the victim of the offense, the public, or both. Paragraph B. A sentence imposed for a felony shall be reasonably calculated to achieve the two overriding purposes of felony sentencing set forth in Division A of this section, commensurate with and not demeaning to the seriousness of the offender's conduct and its impact upon the victim, and consistent with the sentences imposed for similar crimes committed by similar offenders. Paragraph C. A court that imposes a sentence upon an offender for a felony shall not base the sentence upon the race, ethnic background, gender, or religion of the offender. After having served the mandatory 10.5-year prison term imposed pursuant to Revised Code 2929.1 in Count 1, which were to be served consecutively to the 14 years to the attempted murders A1, F1 with the specifications listed below. And after having served the 10 years, 6 months of defendant's sentence, is now eligible to pursuant 2929.20, Paragraph C, Line 4, and has submitted his application for judicial release as requested by the Honorable Court for consideration, and prays the court is guided by the two overriding purposes of his felony sentence pursuant to 2929.11, Paragraph A and B and or C, and hereby provides the court with the following reasons in favor of granting his request for judicial release. Mr. Elizondo was raised in a dual and father. Both have worked. Okay, blah, blah, blah. That's just, okay, what your parents did. Okay, great. The record will reflect Dustin Elizondo's offense was a terrible mistake and not an offense motivated by himself for malicious intent, but made as a last-minute bad choice. Thus, the offense happened under circumstances that will never reoccur, and he prays to never do this again pursuant to 2929.12, Paragraph E. Dustin Elizondo was not sentenced for the purpose to debilitate pursuant to 2929.11a. In fact, Mr. Elizondo is thankful that he came to prison. As a Christian ex-offender, he was not arrested. Instead, he feels he was rescued because he believes that God rescued him from something far worse than prison. God has allowed Mr. Elizondo an opportunity to learn how to follow Jesus. Most of the prisoners who come out of prison angry and unthankful will soon end up in trouble again. The two overriding purposes of Mr. Elizondo's felony sentence was and or is to prevent future crimes by Mr. Elizondo and to rehabilitate him pursuant to 2929.11 A and B. Mr. Elizondo has voluntarily availed himself to the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections educational programs as recommended by this court. He has done this to better understand how his past behavior allowed for the tragic circumstances that necessitated his present confinement. This, in turn, has allowed him to use the hard work ethic that he inherited from both his hardworking mother and father to plan and plow a better path forward once released pursuant to 2929.1 A and B. With the assistance of educational services, Mr. Elizondo has completed the following programs that will aid him along the correct path leading to a successful reentry, and he has received both. He is on his way to receive both his Bachelor's of Science in Interdisciplinary Studies from Ashland University, as well as completed educational programs and received credits through Toledo University as well as Xavier University, and then lists all of the fucking 126 different programs I've listed. Mr. Elizondo has also completed every reentry program available offered by the state of Ohio, including Victims Awareness, Cage Your Rage, Thinking for a Change, and Life Without a Crutch. Mr. Elizondo has taught himself how to cut hair and has also been employed at the facility barbershop for the past 2 years at TOCI. He has completely paid his restitution to the court and met his obligation of the financial term imposed. Mr. Elizondo spends his free time studying the Bible and setting his goals for the future by making plans and writing down his goals. In order for him to be successful, he has learned that he must have these three planning characteristics. His goals must be, number 1, specific, they must be, number 2, realistic, and they must be, 3, measurable with actual dates to accomplish and meet these goals. Mr. Elizondo has taken his time in thinking about the 5 major areas of his life he has learned while he's in prison. Number 1, church. Number 2, money. Number 3, positive employment. Number 4, support. And number 5, making time for leisure activities for himself. Mr. Elizondo has further set his goals about his 3 time periods that he will experience in his life once being released from prison going forward, including right now in the immediate future, the next 5 years, once off PRC, the rest of his life. Mr. Elizondo is thinking big and taking his time to talk to God about his plans for the future. His past will not determine his future. As a result of his incarceration, he is not an ex-con, but he is and considers himself a new person. These efforts above can demonstrate proof of Mr. Elizondo's productive rehabilitation and as such are conducive to the overriding purposes of his felony sentence pursuant to 2929.11 paragraph A. At the time of his sentencing in 2014, Mr. Elizondo was 22 years old. And upon receipt of this judicial release, Mr. Elizondo will be 33 years old. And upon submitting his first judicial release application, he is ready to assist his mother and family who have suffered and will continue to suffer an undue emotional hardship if Mr. Elizondo's incarceration is allowed to continue, thus adding a potential financial burden upon the state and local government resources in direct conflict with revised code 2929.11 paragraph A. Mr. Elizondo's continued incarceration in state prison will add to an already overly crowded prison population and contribute an undue financial burden upon the state at an annual cost of $35,874.75 in direct conflict with revised code 2929.11 paragraph A. Mr. Elizondo, as a result of his incarceration, will have to redouble his efforts to gain the trust and respect of future potential employers. Thus, he is not asking for a blank check judicial release. Mr. Elizondo respectfully contends that one or more community control sanctions, including intensive supervision, daily reporting, house arrest, outpatient counseling, alcohol and drug screening, and reasonable financial penalties, will provide potential employers with judicial oversight and or commensurate with and not demeaning to the seriousness of Mr. Elizondo's conduct and its impact upon the victim's family. Upon his release, Mr. Elizondo will have the support of his mother, Dina Elizondo, his father, Dion Elizondo, his grandmother, who all reside at, and they have agreed to allow him to live there upon his release and to assist in the purchase of clothing, footwear, hygiene, and food to maintain life necessities. He also has multiple friends who have also agreed to offer to assist as well upon his release. Mr. Elizondo also has a young sister and also a younger brother who have their own houses and jobs, cars, forms of transportation, and have agreed to assist upon his release and claim to have saved some money for him to start his new life. They may also be reached at the following address. The record will show that 10.5 years ago at his sentencing, Mr. Elizondo did demonstrate a genuine remorse for his actions. His heartfelt apology went out to the victim, his own family, and to the court. Mr. Elizondo understands that he cannot change the facts of this particular case. He respectfully requests that the Honorable Court views his productive rehabilitation efforts as a physical manifestation of the remorse he is demonstrating during his sentence pursuant to 2929.12 paragraph E, line 5. If granted a judicial release, Mr. Elizondo intends to 1, seek gainful employment, 2, seek employment during the day and the night by utilizing Senate Bill 337, the Certificate of Qualification for Employment, the CQE. 3, further his education at an apprenticeship program and learn to become a computer technician. 4, save his night employment check in the bank to invest in a barbershop that he will establish at a building his mother owns and will name it blank once he saves for 1 year. And 4, be a positive and productive role model for his family and support, as well as a support group, and live a life conducive to be a member that contributes to society. Mr. Elizondo is also willing to volunteer himself with a community service that helps senior citizens at a nursing home 2 or 3 days a week and 2 hours per day of scheduling for a total of 4 to 6 hours a week, and or to assist any and all ASPCA or animal shelters after his schoolwork is completed, and even help as a tutor with the same weekly and hourly schedule above to become a spokesperson and guide them in a positive direction in life and productive role model, and also become members that contribute to the society. Personal remorse. Mr. Elizondo would like to say that God has restored his life and he has taken full personal responsibility.
You have 1 minute remaining.
He has held himself accountable for his actions and his behavior. He has begun to feel remorse for the effects of his actions. He understands the depths of the suffering and grief he has caused the victims, the family, their family, his family, the court, the state of Ohio, and himself. Mr. Elizondo would like to apologize to all the people that he's hurt, that he recognizes, and the people that he hasn't, and realize that he cannot fix everything with a simple apology. However, Mr. Elizondo would like to be placed in a program established by this court that provides offenders with an opportunity to apologize in person to his victim if possible, with a trained person to help in the process. Mr. Elizondo is a new person and would like to start a new life on the outside, and the change has begun on the inside of him. He has become aware of the long-term effects of the wrong things he was doing, and he's willing to continue to make things as right as possible. Even if Mr. Elizondo remains in prison, only he and God can work together to continue to transform his life. He's fully aware that he's responsible for the thinking that he does and the choices he makes. God will provide the tools Mr. Elizondo will need, and Mr. Elizondo will use them. No matter what situation he's facing, he will experience strong emotions when it comes to his family and make the right choices for them and himself to stay out of trouble. Furthermore, Mr.
Thank you for using GTL.
As long as I haven't. Furthermore, Mr. Elizondo has attached support letters that will assist with his judicial release application from both family, friends, and future employers that demonstrate the support he needs as well as the support he will need and is ready. They are all ready and willing to help Mr. Elizondo with his transition back into society. Mr. Elizondo has met the standard requirements recommended by the Honorable Court during the period of rehabilitation and has lived an honest and upright life in prison and has conducted himself with sobriety and respect and has exhibited good moral character and has conformed to and obeyed institutional rules. For the ends of justice have been achieved, and Mr. Elizondo is fit and is the proper candidate for conditional release at the present time under the mitigating factors. Conclusion. Wherefore, for all of the foregoing reasons, Mr. Elizondo respectfully prays and requests that the Honorable Court order a hearing on this motion pursuant to Revised Code 2929.20, paragraph D, line 2, and issue an order compelling Mr. Elizondo's attendance at the hearing pursuant to Revised Code 2929.20, paragraph H, line 3, and that this court graciously grant Mr. Elizondo's judicial release subject to the appropriate community control sanctions outlined within this motion and or pursuant to 2929.20, paragraph I and or line 4. If denied, we pray that this court makes those findings without prejudice, giving him an opportunity to complete any and all requests by this court in order to resubmit and receive his judicial release. End of report.